Hey patrons! This video is all about drawing hair. Now maybe you have seen the step-by-step tutorial that I've already made and I used this hair, but this is the video and this is where you will see all the steps real time. Now I have speeded it up just a little bit so the video wouldn't be too long, but here you can see how I am drawing the overall shape of the hair, because when you want to draw something as complex as a hairstyle, you want to make it as simple as possible. And the simplest shape that I could find in this hairstyle was the overall shape, the outline of the hairstyle. So I was just paying attention to the outline. I'm using the basic flow brush, by the way. As you can see, I have my opacity set to 100% and I'm working on a skin tone background color. And now this is the simplest shape that I could find in the hair. And the next step is to go a little bit more complex, look for the more complex shapes. I'm still keeping it really simple, but for this step I am also looking at the strands of hair. I try to imagine these strands to be like snakes or worms that are laid over each other. So I'm only looking at these strands. I don't pay any attention to individual hairs, but I try to really make the hairstyle as simple as possible for myself. Now I'm working on a new layer right now above the base shape that I had already sketched, and I'm still using the basic flow brush. And when sketching, I like to work at 100% opacity, and I have the opacity set to pen pressure, so I can just gently put pressure on my pen and sketch that way. That's how I like to work. And some hairstyles can be pretty complex with all these strands, with all these strands overlapping each other. And because they are so complex, it is really worth your time to make a little bit more detailed sketch like this, and try to figure out these strands and how they overlap each other. It really helps to start with a good, decent base for your painting. And you don't have to nail it perfectly and really have an exact copy of your reference, but it'll have to make sense a little bit. So you can play a little bit with the angles of the strands, but the most important thing is that, they make sense in the way that, how they overlap. And it's hard to explain, but it has to have a beginning on the head and an end, and you have to be able to follow that strand, and it needs to make sense where it will come out and how it flows, but it doesn't need to be an exact copy of the reference. Right now I'm just refining the previous sketch a bit, and really I'm trying to make sense of the strands for myself. Going over the sketch again really helps me, like I said, make sense of the strands of the hair. Now it's time to go to step 3. I'm merging these layers. And I will have to increase my canvas a little bit. So let's turn it to 150%. And I will duplicate this layer and go to step 3. For step 3, I will start laying down the base color of the hair. I like to start with a dark color, so I have a really dark brown here. And I'm using the same brush as I used for the sketch, the basic flow brush. And I'm just blocking in this color. And I'm already thinking about the light that will come from above. So these lower parts will be a bit darker than these upper parts of, well, that wave of hair. You don't have to be all tidy. You can paint this in nice and loose. Don't worry about those edges too much. Make this even darker here. When I'm laying down these brush strokes, I really think about the way the hair flows. I try to make my strokes in the same direction as the hair is flowing. And while laying down these colors, I'm really just experimenting and trying out different hues and different values. And because hair has a lot of different colors in it, this is a nice way to do it, because automatically I will lay down different colors this way. Let's go to step 4. For this step, I will turn down the opacity of the sketch layer a bit, and I will start painting on top of that. So I've made a new layer above the sketch layer, and now I am using still the same brush, still the basic flow brush, to paint over it and refining these strands a bit. Making my brush a little bit smaller, and it's a bit like going over the sketch layer, but I'm also trying to give a little bit of a suggestion of loose hairs here, of the individual hairs in the strands, giving it a little bit of texture. So some of the dark colors will run in, will flow in the lighter areas, and some of the light colors will move into the darker areas with this small brush I'm using. And I'm trying to define these strands without so I won't be able to need that sketch layer anymore. I don't want to see those sketch lines anymore, but I just want to I want to see those strands without those lines. And still I'm not thinking about individual hairs. I'm just giving some texture to the hair, but really minding these strands of hair, because, well, these bigger strands, they need to feel right before I can add details like loose hairs, individual hairs, smaller strands. And as you can see, I'm making my brush smaller and bigger all the time. But like I always do, actually, I work from big to small. So now my brush will get smaller more often. working on those little details. And making realistic hair really is a work of patience. The more detailed you want it to look, the more patience you will need to have. But I think painting hair is really fun to practice, and once you start to get the hang of it, it's really fun to paint hair. Because, well, it can look so cool. And of course, some hairstyles are a lot more difficult than others. So don't make it too hard on yourself when you're starting out painting hair. If you're still practicing, start with simple hairstyles. Don't go for a complicated French braid updo thing hairstyle. But something like this is great to practice. Here I have added a new layer on top, an overlay layer. I like using overlay layers, and you probably know it already. I like using overlay layers to add a color variation. This is such a nice and simple way to add that color to the hair. I'm using some browns, oranges, yellows to add some variation easily. And now I've added another layer, and this is a screen layer. I like using screen layers to add light to my paintings. This way I can just pick local colors and paint over the hair, and it will make the area lighter. And by using a screen layer, I don't have to think about the actual color I want to pick. I can just pick a local hair color, and yeah, it will lighten it up. So it's an easy way to add light to the hair. Really try to think about where the light is coming from and what parts of these strands need light and what parts don't need light. And a great thing about using a screen layer like this is if the result is too much, if it's too light, you can just turn down the opacity or just try again. Remove your layer and make a new screen layer, and yeah, take a new try. Digital art is very forgiving. And because you can always turn it down, you can be nice and bold. Try and add those highlights to the hair. It can really add that shine to the hair. Digital art gives you the opportunity to experiment, so go ahead. Go ahead, be brave. Sometimes I like adding some blue to the light of the hair as well, especially with the darker hairstyles, the darker hair colors. You can find some blues and how do you pronounce it? Turquoise, light blue, aqua blue in the highlights of the hair. And now I am adding another layer and multiply layer, and just like with the screen layer, it's a very handy layer. The multiply layer allows me to pick local colors or just a dark color and go over areas I want to make darker. And again, I'm using a small brush, trying to indicate some hair texture and some individual hairs. Just a suggestion. I'm trying to follow those strands that we've sketched in earlier, trying to follow those shapes. Also already adding some loose, smaller strands. It'll make it look a bit more loose and natural and add a little bit of realism to this hair. Two more steps to go. Let's go to step number 7. I'll add a normal layer, and I will use this hairbrush to add some more hair texture. What I'm doing is I'm picking up local colors. I try to move darker colors into light areas and lighter colors into light areas, and I'm really trying to keep this very subtle. It's just to add this texture of hair. Now I will be sure to add this brush to this post. So if you're using Photoshop, you can use this brush as well. That's a bit too light. I'm really trying to keep these colors close together and not go too light or too dark. I just want this subtle hair texture. And in this way, it's a bit like blending the colors, all the while adding texture as well. And as you can see, I have turned the opacity to 70%. That'll make it easier to make the transitions more subtle. But maybe if you prefer pressing pretty hard on your pen, then maybe you should turn it down even more. Working all the way down to the ends of the hair. And like I said, when painting hair, you need to be patient. But I guess that's true for all drawing and painting. The more patience you have, the better the result might be. Now I've grabbed the basic flow brush again, and I am going to refine these strands a bit and add some loose hairs, refine some edges here. Just fixing some problems, adding some details. These are really the final tweaks of the hair painting. And sometimes these final tweaks and the final details take the longest. Sometimes it's the longest phase of painting. Not always the most fun part though. I actually prefer the whole sketching phase and the start of painting, but I guess I really don't have that much patience in the end. But it's really worth it to take your time and to be patient and to add those little details and make these final adjustments. Sometimes it's good to take a break and look at your painting again the next day, and you will be able to spot your little mistakes and fix them. And as you can see, I'm using the basic flow brush at a very small size, and I'm constantly picking up local colors. I don't need to pick up new colors. I have all the colors I need right here in the hair. And for areas I would need lighter hair, I'll pick a lighter color, and in areas where I need a little bit of darker hair or a shadow, I will pick darker colors. Now I think it's time for the final step. The hair is almost finished now, but let's add some really final tweaks. So this is step 8 of the painting process, making another layer. Here's a little overlay layer. My layers are starting to feel like a bit of a mess. There are a lot, but I'm going to add some more color with an overlay layer. I've selected a dark brown color, and this will make the hair look more natural. The color, yeah, really, it's warming up the color. As you can see, I'm also using some blue for the shadows, some dark blue. Let's add some yellowish tones to the highlights. And just experiment with this. It's so easy to just add an overlay layer, add some color, and see if you like it. You can always remove it again. But sometimes, well, you get these happy mistakes in your painting. Now here's the final screen layer to add some final highlights. I'm using a soft edge brush. It's a soft blender brush from my basic pack. And now I'm just going to add some shiny highlights. Adding highlights like this really gives that shine to hair. So if you want to make if you want to make the hair look really shiny, then yeah, add those highlights. And a screen layer is, I think, a screen layer is very handy for that. I hope you found this tutorial video, this step-by-step painting hair, I hope you found it useful. Let me know what you think, and also if you want me to paint other hairstyles or other subjects this way and explain it to you in this fashion, let me know, because, well, I'm really here to help, and I really want to know what you want to learn and how I can help you. So I'll just continue here, adding more detail to the hair, refining these edges, adding some loose hairs, and then we'll call this painting of hair finished. As usual, you can find a reference photo in the post so you can try it yourself and follow this tutorial. And you can always share your work in the community section of the Patreon page, and I will let you know my thoughts about your painting and give you any tips or advice if you want my advice, of course. So, well, enjoy the rest of the video, and I will see you next time.